Oh yeah, I'm responsible for this. That's pretty much my job, right there.
Alright, I've been somewhat avoiding this due to not wanting to pigeonhole my channel into only Stargate, but I guess the better choice is to just go ahead and do the damn thing and get it out of the way. Then it exists forever and we can move on to different topics. I'm Dr. Ursa, and this is my review of every episode of Stargate SG-1. Well, the first part at least. I'm going to watch the entire series, which I usually do like once a year or so, and then talk about them as we go. I will try to reference stuff back through the episodes and hopefully end up with a pretty thorough review of all things Stargate. For a quick refresher, Stargate began as a film in 1994, starring Kurt Russell and James Spader as Colonel Jack O'Neill and Dr. Daniel Jackson respectively, and featured humans discovering a wormhole-generating portal that leads to a faraway planet that is ruled by a seemingly immortal alien overlord. That is an oversimplification of what actually happens, but you should check it out sometime if you haven't, and I'm sure we will cover it in a dedicated video at some point. The movie is fantastic and did well enough, leading to the story being picked up a few years later in 1997 for a full-length television series. Airing originally on Showtime, thus allowing for a slightly more adult tone, Stargate SG-1 ended up running for 10 seasons total. Join me in however long these end up taking, and let's review every episode of SG-1 together. This will initially be a series of videos, with a longer cut eventually being released down the road. Thanks again for clicking this, and let's get started with Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2, Children of the Gods. This whole series kicks off with some bored airmen overseeing the now inactive and mothballed Stargate from the 1994 film. Several aliens arrive through the gate, rocking a serpent theme versus Ra's bird-headed soldiers, and they target and capture a female airman before commencing an attack on the remaining soldiers. You gotta love the old school spray and pray method of Hollywood combat. General Hammond arrives and witnesses what will become the trademark eye glow of a Goa'uld before they escape back through the gate. We then see Colonel O'Neill, now played by Richard Dean Anderson, being called back from his retirement with just a simple mention of the term Stargate. General Hammond and Colonel O'Neill hit it off well enough with a strong ethic for military discipline. There is a serious concern that the yet unnamed Goa'uld guy with glowing eyes might be Ra from the film. We know better, but our heroes have yet to learn that. We have a few fun moments before Jack admits the secret from the movie, that Dr. Jackson and everyone else back on Abydos survived by hiding the bomb on Ra's ship as it fled the planet. We also get our first tease at Colonel O'Neill's past trauma, which is pretty heavy and will come up a few times throughout the series. Remember, secure your weapons at home. Walter shows up right here in episode 1, number 1 unsung hero of the SGC right there. Jack sends a box of tissues to the gate as a message to Daniel, which prompts his response back on the now empty box, teasing Jack's relationship with his friend. Mission approved, and Jack is back in uniform. During the briefing, we meet a core member of the team, the always impressive Captain Samantha Sam Carter. Look, there's some obvious, oh my god, she's a woman in a man's world stuff going on due to the time of this show's release, but they do eventually drop this particular plot point. Sam is awesome, and if you don't respect her, then did we even watch the same show? A small detail often lost on me is that Sam is a veteran of the Gulf War and has plenty of actual flight hours logged in combat. Sam's the real deal, as smart as she is deadly, and will always be one of my favorites. Jack applies his Spec Ops background and logic and ends up getting a recon mission approved, and we see the crew gearing up to step through the gate. I really love the old desert uniforms. It's a bit of a short-lived classic in military fashion. I was in during the era of the ACU in the Army, and I think what came both before and after looked a little better. When the team arrives on Abydos, they are ambushed by locals still using equipment left behind during the fight against Ra. Daniel ends up saving the group, and there cannot be enough said about Michael Shanks really leaning into the mannerisms James Spader brought to the role in the film, at least for the first few seasons. Sam immediately starts nerding out over the dial-home device, something that will become a mainstay of the entire series. We get some fun scenes of everyone catching up with the locals and see that Daniel has gone full Fremen. Jack and Skara have a moment, and then we learn the final secret of it all. The Stargates are not just a one-way portal between 2 points, they are in fact an entire network of interplanetary travel. Sam lends her considerable intelligence to Daniel's working theories regarding a form of galactic map written on the walls of another tomb, the Abydos Cartouche. Daniel and Sam work out a theory of stellar drift, allowing the US Air Force to be able to track and adjust for these differences, thus allowing access to many other new locations. There's some interesting aspects to the technology of this show as it starts, because things really started taking off around this time. They reference digital video as a new useful tech in this first episode, but we'll end up touching on concepts like nanotechnology, cloning, and I think they might even end up with early smartphones by the end of it all. Several soldiers, called Jaffa, attack and capture or kill most of the natives still around the Stargate. We learn the name of the introspective guard, Tilk, and see as Daniel's wife Shara is captured. It is decided in the aftermath of the attack that Daniel will return to Earth. He instructs the natives to cover the Stargate once they leave in order to protect them, with the caveat to remove the stone in 1 year's time for 1 day only. As the team returns to Earth, they get their first look at the Iris, a collapsing shield that can close within millimeters of the event horizon of the wormhole. This means that anything coming through will be instantly killed as it attempts to rematerialize them into this gap. More on this to come later. We get some shots of the human prisoners being taken for inspection, and some more shots of Tilk looking slightly apprehensive over his role in this whole thing. And maybe that's just some projection based on my future knowledge from the show, but Christopher Judge will always be one of my favorites, so call me biased. Jack and Kowalski bond over their care for their injured friend, and without getting too sappy, I did always appreciate the positive depictions of the military in this show without it getting overly patriotic. Daniel is seen spending the night at Jack's house, and the two bond over troublesome pasts. This will be a friendship forged through shared trauma that will come to define the future of humanity, at least in the Stargate universe. We then transition to the still unnamed villain as he scans the captured airmen. We see an alien worm come out of the stomach of his queen and disapprove of the airmen for some unknown reason. Golden Boy then does the hand wave and kills the airmen due to this rejection. General Hammond is a direct and effective leader and immediately leans into the expertise of this surrounding team. He does show some initial hesitation to using the gate and reaching out to the greater galaxy at whole, but is sort of brought around that the opportunity outweighs the risk. This leads to the creation of Stargate Command, with 9 teams total being established to go out and explore and learn on behalf of the United States and Earth. Their ally Ferretti finally wakes up from his injuries and is able to actually provide the coordinates that were the source of the attack on Abydos. Good job, Ferretti. SGs-1 and 2 step through the gate, and we get our first usage of what will become the staple gate travel animation. Some things never get old. Daniel's wife Shara undergoes the selection process next, and sadly is approved by the gross worm creature. We see Tilk look on with trepidation, with some pretty visible signs of displeasure with this little head shake that he does. Dial in the emotion, buddy. Daniel reveals them to some locals, and they get mistaken for higher beings due to their travel through the gate, or Chapa-I. They are then taken to the city of Chulak, which is another name that will come up a lot more as this show goes on. Tilk leads in a party, and we finally hear the main villain's name, Apophis, as he introduces his new queen, and it's none other than Daniel's wife Shara, now with her own pair of glowy eyes. SG-1 is captured and thrown in prison, where they at least get to reunite with Skara. We see back at Stargate Command that they're preparing to possibly send a nuke through the gate if this whole mission goes bad, but General Hammond is at least level-headed enough to not rush this decision. Tilk then comes in and introduces a new group of lesser unnamed Goa'uld that will choose new hosts from the remaining prisoners. Unfortunately, Skara is chosen by one of these no-name villains. Tilk then looks on in disgust as this choosing process plays out, leading to Jack reaching out to him for support once the order is given to execute the remaining humans. Jack and Tilk have their awesome moment, and Tilk betrays his fellow Jaffa to support Jack in trying to save these people. They end up blowing a hole through the wall for everyone to escape through, and Tilk prepares to stay behind and die for his cause. O'Neill then calls him to action and offers him direct support for saving them all. Tilk takes a moment to reveal the secret behind the Jaffa, that they all carry infant Goa'uld in their stomach pouches that replace their immune systems in exchange for longer life and increased strength. We will come to know his larva as Junior. The Goa'uld move to secure the Stargate, and we get our first look at some of the iconic ships from this show: Death Gliders and an Alkesh bomber. Kowalski and SG-2 show up and support the escaping prisoners via Stinger missiles, but we do see the main villain escape through the gate. As our heroic airmen pursue these fleeing false gods, they unfortunately learn that Skara has also been possessed by a Goa'uld. They do manage to dial Earth and send the signal through right before they're overrun, and before Earth has to send the nuke through themselves. Much respect to the dude that runs up behind Jack and just starts throwing rocks at the enemy. That takes guts. As everyone escapes back through the gate, we get our first 2 splats against the Iris. I just want to say that this always felt like a particularly awful way to go in this series. 1 second you're stepping through a shiny portal, then you're dead. Jack introduces Tilk and plants the seeds that he'd like him to be a primary member of SG-1. The first episode ends with General Hammond setting the team up for debriefing and Jack and Daniel making a promise to find their loved ones together. So sweet. And with that, the saga of SG-1 begins. I'm going to try and put out at least one of these a week for the foreseeable future, and we will continue to cover any Part 1, Part 2 situations together like this premiere. But please consider subscribing so you can keep up with my journey through this entire series. This is a slightly daunting task, but one I'm looking forward to sharing with you all. Let me know if you enjoyed this down in the comments, or just tell me about your favorite things to come in SG-1. And there is a lot to come. Cast changes, new allies and villains, and the ever-evolving knowledge of the greater universe that eventually led to 2 separate spin-off shows. And that's a good question. How should we handle Atlantis when we get there? Should there be a spin-off series covering all of SGA, or should we just push through SG-1 then circle back around for our friends in the Pegasus Galaxy? Who knows? We have more than enough to get through before we figure that out. 214 episodes. So thanks again for watching, fellow fans, and keep your eyes to the sky for the next episode. I've been Dr. Ursa, and until next time.
Do not attempt to escape.